Welcome to another Monday Mindset Moment. We have another special segment where we're bringing on a beloved guest. She has been in our community for more than 3 years. She's in her 4th year of mentorship. I'm really excited to introduce you to her when she arrives. We are doing this series where we're doing some live coaching and gathering tips and insights from folks because we want you to really get it into your nervous system, into your sort of map of how things work, to know that you're not alone in this parenting journey. No parent needs to parent alone. In fact, we really stand for that. And we really believe that here at Raising Our Resilience, that it takes a village of resilient parents to raise resilient children. And it's been proven through so many studies that community and that sense of I'm not alone in this. Our social support network is a predictor of not only survival, but also mental health and thriving, our sense of life satisfaction, our ability to bounce back from adversity. And these are things that we want to build in for not just our children, which we do through whatever maybe after school activities you sign up for, whatever community you have outside of school or within a school, whether that be through common interests or common beliefs. It's really important for us to gather around life together. And personally, I've been noticing, as I have family members going through very difficult things right now, what a difference it makes to go deeper and invest in my closest relationships in my community. I feel more buoyant, I feel more resilient, and it is also a giant motivation hack to have a sense of strong relationship and relatedness with others. It's been also proven in research that kids, in my personal research, that kids feel more bolstered, more motivated, more likely to lean in, more likely to show up for each other and express their gratitude, their appreciation, and really see themselves as a part of something that's meaningful if they have stronger relationships with the people in their lives. And some of this is making visible the invisible. So one tip I want to give you while we're waiting for Tiffany to join us is that when you are wanting to build a sense of community, remember that kids are not necessarily looking for clues that they have support on their own. So a lot of what happens just sort of flies by them. When I say make the invisible visible, I'm talking about what it takes to put a meal on the table, what it takes to make sure there's electricity and heat and clean running water and the garbage collected, what it takes to for this to exist in the world, a phone or a device or an iPad. They don't really have the backstory. They came into the world with all of these things and all these people sort of already in place or kind of gathering around them, but we don't always reveal to them how these things came to be. And also as adults, often we're oblivious. So one of my favorite hacks for boosting motivation, improving relationships, it's what I did my master's study on, is telling stories of people who are doing the good work behind the scenes to benefit your child. Now, this can look a few different ways. In my study, I took what was, a group of kids that were, they were doing pretty well in their everyday classroom, but they would go to their special teachers and things would fall apart. And I was seeing this slide in behavior, disrespect, not being motivated, being distracted. And it wasn't because the teachers weren't capable. Like I sat in, they not only did they have interesting curriculum, they also had it worked out in steps. So nobody was being overwhelmed or underwhelmed by the curriculum. They were given lots of choices and autonomy and influence. I'm kind of running through my motivation model here. They even, remodeled a growth mindset and all of these pieces and showing oh, your effort turns into results. So you think there's all these intrinsic motivators there, but there was something missing. And so what we did is we told these stories about I went and said to the teachers, hey, so what's something you've done that was above and beyond your job description, where you really went out of your way to do something for the kids' sake? And they each told me a story. And I said, oh, why'd you do that? And I collected that reason. It was often I want the kids to be more successful or have more fun or have more ease or more enjoyment, something, right? Or get to know each other better. And then I brought these stories back to the kids. And after I told enough of them, they started to put together this picture of, oh my gosh, this new music room didn't just come out of nowhere. These seeds to plant into the garden didn't just come out of nowhere. These great new paints that we get to play with don't just appear. There are like people behind this, and resources. Anyways, summary is, tell your kids about the invisible work, make it visible, let them know what the intention is of, bringing in something new into the household, or having, what it took for your relative to visit us, how many hours on the plane or train or car, what they had to maybe skip or give up at home to come visit us, how many stores they went to find their present. Tell these stories, and it can really help boost things. So that's my tip as we're kind of welcoming Tiffany in. So Tiffany, so glad you're here. Hi, let's bring you on and unmute you and come on video when you're ready. So I can welcome you in. So Tiffany's here. I'll just do a quick introduction to Tiffany. She and I met at a workshop many years ago, about 4 years ago, at Nia House Learning Center. It was in person before the pandemic. And I was talking about navigating big emotions and meltdowns and tantrums in young kids. And I remember, Tiffany, you were in the back and standing there just really listening, but having to leave every now and then to sort of take a breather, because there was just a lot going on at that time for you and for your daughter. And I still am not able to see your video, or and I have you unmuted. Are you able to come
Sorry,
on?
I'm here.
I don't
know how to share my video.
So as she's trying that, we were wrapping up the webinar, or the workshop, and I remember, Tiffany, we got to have a moment together where we were chatting, and she goes, it doesn't feel right, like this shouldn't be this hard, and I don't really understand what's going on. And I remember being able to reassure you that what you were experiencing was normal, and a lot of parents, or a lot of parents of young kids, go through the same thing, where they're coming up, like they're trying their best earnestly, and they're like successful in other areas of their life, but then suddenly they hit these roadblocks and another one, and it starts to stack up and kind of blow out our nervous system. And the next thing you know, you're just like stressed, anxious, and crying spontaneously. And that it doesn't have to, not only does it not have to be that way, but you're not the only one. And I remember you feeling really reassured by that, Tiffany. And then we ended up deciding to do work together. And something that stood out to me when I interviewed you to see if it was a good fit is you had said, well, like anything, this parenting and raising kids and being a good mom is something that, I really, it's like a goal. It's something I really want. And it's probably one of the most important things I'll ever do. And I remember you saying to me, Tiffany, something like, and in every other part of my life, it takes about 3 years to get really, comfortable with a skill set and maybe even master it and do it, doing it pretty well. So I'm anticipating this is going to be a 3-year journey. And I remember you saying that to me and me thinking like, oh, we'll build it for you, Tiffany. Like we're going to have a second year, a third year and beyond, if that's what you're interested in. And I've just watched you grow. I've watched you lean into difficult work. I've seen you also lean back and take care of other things and then come back in. But one of the reasons I want to showcase you today is that we did capture your story from 3 years ago, and wanted to play some of those clips back and hear your perspective now. So I know that you're having a hard time joining, and I think we're probably troubleshooting over there. So please go ahead and keep doing that. And then what I'll do is I'll just play some of these clips, and I'll be keeping an eye out for when you pop on to bring your voice into the room. So we'll start with this video here. Okay, so when I share this with you, it's not to just sort of like oh, here's an example of some success and stuff like that. It's really because Tiffany has a special way of articulating how this work has impacted her perspective. And I think that, and shares like some really strong kind of like some insights or breakthroughs she's had along the way. And I just know that, there are folks out there who can really benefit from hearing this right now. And that's why we want to share this with you. So I'm curious, let's see, I'm going to go ahead and hit play. And I'm curious what stands out to folks. And for you, Tiffany, this is kind of a retrospective. So let's see what stands out to you.
Behaviors. She'd be pouring like all of her food on the floor. Extremely knowledgeable. I can't thank you enough for all your help. There's never like a good guidebook on like how to deal with certain kinds of behaviors. She'd be pouring like all of her food on the floor. She would throw a tantrum. She would act out. And to me, things are hard because they're not very logical. In our culture, in our society, we feel that if you're being too lax or understanding with your kid, you are being enabling. Like, oh, they're taking advantage of you. You're being weak. You need to be more stern. That's the message we're constantly hearing. Also issues with me and my partner where he had a very different style of raising children. And I think that we both had to come to terms with the way that our parents had raised us and like kind of see like what we liked and didn't like about that too. And like what was unconscious about the way that we parented our daughter together. It was stressful. Like I just didn't want to be like constantly worrying about like, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing something harmful? Am I giving her the support that she needs to really grow up and be like, a capable, resilient young person? I decided to work with Vanessa because I felt like coaching was a really good way for me to like make changes and improvements. I feel like when you have a book or you have a video or a podcast, it's like those are really good ideas, but am I really going to commit to making these action steps happen to like create a plan or do this work? And when you have a coach, in a lot of ways, it's someone kind of guiding you and problem solving with you, but also for me, it's like holding me accountable. The things that she was saying made a lot of sense. Like I was making connections between what I was observing with my daughter and the things that she was saying about how children develop. It just made me realize like, these are things that I haven't tried that could really work. And when I tried them at home, they actually did work. And so I was thinking, yeah, like I'm seeing progress. So let me try to keep up with this. Having that toolbox of what to do in your back pocket because things are constantly changing with kids. Before she wasn't in like a defiant stage. Now that she is, it's like, okay, I have the explaining tools. I have the calming tools. I have the, giving kids option tools. I think that before I was really just worked up and angry. And there were times when I noticed that like I would kind of like get upset and like worked up because of my frustrations with how to be a good parent. So when she would do the same, like pouring her glass of water on the ground, I would kind of yell or get upset or get frustrated. And now when she does it, I'm just like, okay, I accept that. That's just like something she does. Let me work with that. I'll give reminders on like where we can and cannot spill water. One of the best times to play and not play. I feel like much more calm and just capable and just more resilient in the face of, parenting disasters. Sometimes when we are actually being calm and firm and neutral when we talk to our kids, we're not yelling, not screaming, not belittling them. We're teaching them emotional management and emotional resiliency because we need to teach them like when things are really tense and stressed out that we have to also realize how to, we were modeling for them. There tends to be this assumption that parents have to suffer alone. One of the biggest benefits of doing group work is the fact that you realize you're not alone. Like you realize that other people are going through similar things. You're not a unique situation. Most of the time, your problems are very common. All kids go through this. A lot of parents go through this, and you can learn from other parents. You can commiserate with other parents. You can learn to have compassion for the people. They can have support and compassion for you too. So it's generally a community of mutual support and co-learning.
All right, woo! Success. We have Tiffany with us. Looking beautiful. Hi there.
Hi. Sorry for the technical difficulties.
Totally fine. We are so happy you're here, and what a gift to get to hear your perspective from then and then now in the present time. So I know you didn't get to hear all of the replay, so we might replay a little section at a time together. But I guess just hearing even some of it, is there anything that kind of stands out to you about just like the journey you've been on and like hearing that back?
Yeah, I think one thing that's so great about this program is that I actually feel like in some ways I'm a different person. I think that when I first started, doing this program, I was just in a really challenging place. I think that I was having problems co-parenting with my partner. I was really trying to figure out what it meant to be like a good supportive parent to my child. And again, I think a lot of the things that we were talking about before about like what it means to be a good parent, what it means to have like good boundaries and still good values. I think there's so many confusing messages. I still feel those today, but I feel much more confident in my parenting. And it's really translated a lot to how I show up in so many other parts of my life. I think especially when it comes to like, how I relate to my parents, how I relate to my family members, how I relate to my coworkers, because a lot of what we learn in this program is really about like, how do we show empathy? How do we connect with people? And how do we make sure that we can create like forms of collaboration? And so, yeah, it's been a really great journey for me.
It's like it's quite a bridge to collaborate and empathize with someone who is basically your heart walking outside your body, first of all, so you feel protective of them, love them to death. But they're also like a completely different stage of development, right? They're like, so their reference points, the way their brain works, the way their emotions run. And then they're also just another person, like a different temperament, personality, preferences, and all these things. So I feel like it's interesting how you bring this work into, working with adults is a lot of what you're referencing, right? Family members and into work. But I think there's something really special about doing it with your own kids that I like to think of raising children as like a completely customized, like very personalized and accelerated program in personal growth made just for you. Like here's your curriculum, your child, your heart, right? Your growth. And Tiffany, I love what you said. And when she's mentioning the program, she's talking about the Family Foundations Immersion, which is this year-long program. And this is our last week to enroll people in this cohort. So if people are interested, please let us know. And when you say the program, I also think of like doing the work of like actually looking at your parenting, seeing what's working, seeing what, areas you're struggling in and getting support is what it really comes down to. One thing you said in your video that stood out to me too, is that there's never a good guidebook. And at that time, especially what was really kind of blowing you out were like the tantrums, like the big emotions. And when you haven't been around little ones having big emotions, either for a long time or ever, it really is, it's like an event. It can be really an upsetting event, like every time. I guess I'm curious if there are any like tools now that you've come through, many years of mentorship, and now you're like this more confident parent. Like, what would you say for people who are just listening in, maybe haven't done this work? Like, what tools kind of stand out to you that you find yourself using on the regular? And it's going to be different for every parent. So it's always interesting to hear like what has really stuck with you. And I heard empathy and
Right.
collaboration. So anything else that you could share with folks?
Yeah.
Learn from?
Well, one thing I also learned about the Family Foundations program is that it makes you think holistically about what it takes to have a healthy family, right? How do I be a good parent, but also how do I relate to my child and help their development? And one thing I start with is myself, really. And I know that when I am stressed out in my life, when I'm doing like a million things, I have to find ways to still be resilient myself and be a good, just show up my values, live my values when things get really tough. And, when tantrums happen, that could be your tough point. And so for myself, it's like, how do I remain calm and grounded, which is really challenging for me sometimes. I'll say actually more than sometimes, a lot of the time. When I think to myself, I could look at my daughter and say, the reason why she's upset is so illogical, right? To my brain, to myself. But I have to get into her shoes, into her perspective of like what she's going through, So first of all, I need to start with myself. So it's like, how can I be a calm, resilient parent? What do I need to calm down, right? Do I need to breathe? Do I need to walk away and then come back? Do I need to, use whatever technique there is to like become more into my like wise brain so my lid is not flipped? And so that's one thing I try to start with. I think the second thing that's been really helpful is the connecting before you correct kind of tool. Knowing that sometimes when children, especially young children, are acting out, they, they're feeling raw emotions, but they also want to see your love and care. And how can we work with each other through the hard moments, but still care for each other, when we're having difficult times. And so I try to remember that. It's like, I've seen many times in which my daughter has done very, very angry things towards me. She's yelled at me. She's thrown things at me, you know, because she's younger. So it's like, that's her reaction. She's tried to like physically hit me and do other things. And then afterwards, once we kind of connect with each other and calm down and try to like do some like co-regulation techniques together, like breathe together or just like connect with each other physically, you could see her anger transform into sadness and regret too. And sometimes she'll even say, "I'm sorry, mama." And she'll realize like her reaction might be not proportional to her feelings of hurt or anger. And so seeing that transformation that she's going through by using these tools is really helpful to remember that we shouldn't take these things personally. And we should remember that, like, you know, going through the motions of like, you know, living in our values and trying to be there for each other and show up for each other and support each other through the hard times really does count. And it sends a good message that we are going to like struggle through things together. I think those are some of my biggest techniques that I really value. Again, through my daughter, through with my relationship with other people. And, you know, tantrums change over time. Like, you know, when I first started the program, I think my daughter's around 2.5 years old. And my daughter
Right.
is
It's
6
like
now.
pouring stuff out. There's like you're pouring stuff out on the table. Like she's still figuring out how liquids work. And
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
redirecting, like, oh, we can't pour that out,
Right.
but we can pour this out over here, over the sink.
Yeah.
That sort
Yeah.
of stage.
I think one thing that's interesting is that, you know, kids, like once you master things, people change, right? The children change. So it's like, I can deal with a 3-year-old stage, but what happens to the 6-year-old stage? And so, but the tools kind of stay the same. It's like, you're learning to adapt and be creative and be a problem solver, as we are all evolving and changing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, and that's part of what, you know, I mentioned you had to hop off for that moment, but and when you had come to me, you had said something like, you know, it's going to take at least 3 years to get to a place. And I think that's just for all tool building or tool and skill building and just sort of getting to a place of feeling like you have fluency, even, right? Like where you can adapt tools to the situation. And I think there's no better way to illustrate that than to like walk up the ladder of the ages and stages with kids, because it's literally like the game changes and we have to keep up. And but after these 3 years, like I've seen you adapting, like and you come with great questions to our coaching sessions and our leadership sessions with insights and perspective. And I guess when I what I hope for folks is that they can get a sense of what it's like to really commit to something like this. And I think Tiffany, you're such a great example of this. And I guess if you could go back in time when you were making the decision about whether or not, you know, to go forward with coaching or to like even come to that workshop and you're in that room with other parents, like if you could go back in time and like whisper something to yourself in the ear, like what would you tell yourself about this journey and especially like this parenting journey? What message would you have for yourself back then? Now, not knowing what you know now with the tools and the adaptation and the relationship that you've been able to build with your daughter.
I think one thing I would have told myself is to be more kind to myself, to be more, you know, as we extend empathy towards other people, like extend empathy towards ourselves. It's hard. We make mistakes. We have hard times. We feel bad about missteps and what we could have done better. And I think that's one thing I'm getting better at, even though it can be hard at times. But sometimes when you embrace the learning and the mistake making, you're a much better learner and you're much better at being more resilient.
And is there anything you would say to like reassure yourself? Like what would the message be like at the heart of it, do you think, at that time? So I love that. That's like a good directive, like be kinder to yourself. It's a, you know, right? I wonder how would you soothe yourself back then? Like if you could go to that workshop where you were feeling in your feels. I wonder like what would you say to yourself back then, or someone who's maybe in that same situation now?
Yeah, I think one thing I like to say to myself oftentimes is like, you're doing your best. And I think that goes for many scenarios. Like we are doing our best with the time and space we are given. with the knowledge that we are equipped with. We can't do anything more than that,
Yeah. Yeah. And there's so much self-compassion for exactly where you're at, and also acceptance. I'm hearing you like getting present and grounded in like acceptance. And I remember you doing that even with your toddler, pouring stuff out. You're like, okay, this is happening. So you're like accepting that that's where she's at. She's still experimenting with liquids. And
Right.
extend so learning to extend that to your child, oftentimes it circles right back. We can extend that to ourselves. And then we become that role model you talked about. So it's just this beautiful like loop that keeps closing and it
Yeah.
keeps do that. I also know that you came up against quite a bit of pressure to be a sterner parent. And you really saw your daughter's response to that and were in your gut. I think you knew like, yes, she needs firm boundaries and clarity, just like all kids, right? Clear expectations. But there was another piece that she needed from you besides like the firmness, and
Yeah.
really followed your intuition around that. And how do you feel about that now? Like, you kind of declared it a few years back in that video of like, we're getting all this pressure to be stricter or else we're enabling, or like, how do you feel about that present time now that you've watched through several years of, choosing something else or choosing a combination?
Right. Um, yeah, so much has happened since that moment. I think, one thing I always try to remind myself about, these lessons is that, again, these are things that are really reflective of our values around development and what it means to be in good relationship with each other. And I think that these are not what's the word? I think that sometimes when we give in to external pressures, we forget like our own wisdom, you
Yeah.
know. And also I think it's really recognizing generational trauma and how
Yeah.
that shows up in our lives.
Yes.
And just trying to actively undo patterns of generational trauma must be intentional work. It
Yes.
has to be very thoughtful, like very reflective, because it's so easy to slip back into old patterns of behavior and old thought processes. So
Yeah.
it's hard to be sometimes the unpopular person. It seems like in a relationship, right, where you're talking to someone and they're like, well, you should be X, Y, and Z. And I'm saying like, actually, I'm seeing this work.
Yeah.
It is really, I think it's really important to just know who you are and what you're standing for, and know that what you're doing is working. I think that that's the one thing that really transformed over time, is that, my ex and I had different ways of parenting, but over time I showed that actually these other ways of these techniques are actually working. And not only do they work, but they actually create long-term benefits, right? One person was speaking to my ex, and they said to him, you know, shutting down your kid and being firm and commanding can sometimes lead to like some short-term, results, but it can lead to long-term harm. And I think that was really good to reflect on.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've seen you even in the face of those pressures, either like find your internal wisdom and strength to be steady, or come and lean into the community that you built around yourself, whether it was, inside the program, outside the program. Say, look, here's what I'm actually, here's the evidence, and here's the reality I'm seeing is that when I have, when I make space for my child's feelings was kind of the biggest one versus shutting down. And like you described so beautifully, allowing for that cool down period for lids to come back on and then come to address the thing. It, it just kept showing evidence that, you just really saw what you saw, right? And you said, this is the evidence, I'm seeing this work. And if there's so much power in claiming that for not just, the moment, but for, like you said, for generational change. And that's something, you're right, we have to be intentional and active about, and that's what we do in our work, right? In leadership and legacy, like the second and third year and beyond programs, as we start to really say like, okay, let's acknowledge where we came from. Let's like, take the best, leave the rest. And let's acknowledge where we are now, and let's really aspire to where we want to go, so we can have this sort of like momentum of generational perspective that is a context for every decision we make, around parenting, every choice. Now, it doesn't mean you have to be in that perspective 24 hours a day, but I think what it does is it does ground us into what are our core values that we keep mentioning. So Tiffany, it's just really lovely to hear your reflections on this. I don't know, folks are listening. Hope you're feeling like empowered and excited about what's possible in this work. I know I didn't put this question on the list, Tiffany, but I would love to just hear, like, is there anything that's been like surprising to you in the work? And like, even like maybe lit you up, like something like light or like exciting or fun or, funny about this journey of parenting? Because I know that we've had some sidebar conversations of like, I didn't know I had an inner preschool teacher. Like, I found my preschool teacher voice, or just that, yeah, I'm curious if there are any surprises along the way that you'd want to speak to.
I think just the biggest one that I mentioned before is how much the learnings in this program have such a ripple effect in my life. It affects like how I engage in conversation with people, especially my parents, my partner at the time, my coworkers. I think that my parents have listened to the workshops, and my friends and family have listened to the workshops. And it's great to see them try to adopt the tools and find them useful as they support my daughter as well. So in some ways, it's creating like a real community of support for her, where we're trying to all get aligned on the same page about how we show up as caretakers or caregivers to try to like instill the same messages. Because I think for any child or for any person to receive multiple messages in different forms in different ways is very confusing, especially as you're trying to develop and grow your brain. And so it's been great to see like my parents be like, hey, I did this technique, it worked really well. And it worked, we were navigating a really bad meltdown tantrum while you were away. So that's always been a great surprise. It's surprising to see people who like my ex, who are really anti the techniques and program, to really embrace some of them, changing like the way that people think and view parenting and their relationship to children. I think that it's allowed me to have just a deeper sense of empathy. Like I always thought like I would have empathy in my, as a value, but like it really, when you're pushed against a wall because your kid hits you with a chair over your head, like it really takes it to a different level of empathy, of being like, well, what is going on here? Let me think about what's happening. How can I like, kind of control like the multiple things happening at once, and move with my daughter through a healthy place, so like you're really trying to like kind of triage and problem solve very quickly. And the more you do it over time, the better you get. Not to say that I'm perfect by far, and I definitely have my moments, but like vast improvement than before.
Yeah, and doing your best means something different now than before you develop skill set. Yeah, it's just like we have more at your disposal, and that's amazing. Yeah, Tiffany, so proud of you and all the work you've put in, all the ways that you're showing up. And it's not just like the one direction, you to child. It's like you to child, to coworkers, to family members, to the older generation. So it's like up, it's down, it's all around, and it's internal too. So it's kind of like when you say ripple effect, I really do think of it as like all multi-directional and all.
Right. Also, just to say that the chair situation was a very one-time drastic situation. Does not happen often. I don't think. Anyway.
Yeah, you don't want to
I'm trying to go extreme here. When it gets around, bad, it gets really bad. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. No, I mean, sometimes it's the extreme examples that stand out in our minds though, because they're the ones that test us the most. And I think the fact that you're like, you triage quick on your feet, able to handle it, like one of the tougher examples is it's really illuminating. It's like, even when my child goes to this extreme place that she almost never does, somehow like I'm still able to, find my calm and find a way through it and help her get to a healthy place. I'll try to understand what's going on quickly. I think otherwise those incidents can blow us out. And I know there are people listening to this who are like, oh my gosh, like I want to run, I want to hide, I want to fight back. The worst comes out of me. And we both have been there too. And I really like what you said all along the way is like, this is hard, this is stressful. And, and you're not alone in that. Like we're not just sort of set up when we become an adult, we're suddenly ready to raise children and in these and handle these really tough moments with all the tools at our disposal. Because if we don't have them to grab onto, then like we're literally grasping the air. Right? So I'm just seeing you just so consistently do the work in the day to day with your daughter, and really take things that work. And like when you, again, we have people putting pressure on you to do it differently, you're like, no, I'm seeing this have an impact, I'm sticking with it. And that tenacity, that vision, and that commitment you've had to your daughter and to change has been amazing to witness. So thank you for all this insight, Stephanie. This is the part where I transition to see if there's anything that you would like to celebrate, any recent wins, and anything that you'd like help with today. We can do a little demo of coaching if there's something up right now. I know sometimes you've got something and sometimes you don't. So this is more of a check-in, and otherwise we can wrap. So it's up to you. So coaching time now, or we can wrap.
Oh, for myself?
Yeah, this is for
Okay.
you. Yeah.
Um,
So anything you want to celebrate that we can build off of, or glean some insights from, or is there anything you'd like help with today that we could coach you in a moment?
what do I want to celebrate? I think that one thing I want to celebrate is my daughter really trying to be more vocal about her emotions and more articulate. And that seems like, maybe not that big of a deal, but sometimes it could be hard to be vulnerable and to say things that might be, that, that she might fear judgment, even at her young age. And so I think that's been good. I think one thing that has been challenging, and this is very recent, this has been a recent turn of events, is that she has been very stubborn about her opinion about stuff. And so this kind of was growing over time, but it became more forceful recently. And part of me wants to kind of wait and see how like the school year goes, because, this happens sometimes over summer. And I recognize over summer, you have like not a fixed schedule, right? You're going on vacations, we're having different bedtimes. Having more consistency for a child could be like more stabilizing for them. So I want to see like, school year just started. Maybe in a couple of weeks, let's like revisit if she's still really having like control issues, or if she's like more like open to different things, so, but that's one thing that's come up. It's like almost like I'll say like, hey, one example is my daughter and I were on vacation with my family. We were at the pool. She was having a great time. My sister was actually taking care of her while I went and did something else. And my sister's like, well, I need to go back to the hotel room because, I need to get some menstruation pads. And my daughter just had like a massive meltdown. She's like, no, I want to stay in the pool, which I think is totally understandable. It's like, yeah, I want to stay in the pool too. I wouldn't want to go with my, my auntie to like do whatever she needs to get done. But she kind of went 0 to 100. She goes 0 to 100 a lot. And so, yeah, trying to see if that was a situational thing where she just is like kind of destabilized because of being on vacation, or if it's going to be more of a pattern, a behavior where she's like testing her limits of like how much she can get control of if she just acts out a lot. So, yeah.
Right. So it sounds like the main thing you're doing is like really keeping an eye on it to see, and this is like advanced student stuff, by the way, just to brag on your behalf a little bit, which is that instead of saying, oh my gosh, my kid is this stubborn kid and they, overreact and I'm stuck in this, Trump, right? It's sort of just kicking back and staying curious, like, is this more about situation? Is this a real pattern that we're going to need to kind of bring in some support around it? I think also you just showcase like being able to say, hey, pick one thing that makes sense about this. That's something we talked quite a bit about around emotion coaching. It's like if there is something that makes sense about it, it's not completely out there. Which is, yeah, I can relate to that sense of it's upsetting that you don't get to do what you still want to do. Like I get it. Like, yeah, you don't want to leave the pool right now. And at her age, and maybe everyone knows, like it's been about 3.5. So she's 6 now, right? She had her 6th birthday. Yeah. So just at her age, you can start to plant seeds of the right size reaction for the incident. It's like, yeah, you can be like validating, you can be upset about not getting what you want, and you can have strong feelings of sadness and anger, like of not having control over what's going on. And yelling at your aunt is really not an appropriate response. Like she doesn't, and you can even start to say things like, your aunt doesn't deserve to be yelled at because you still want to swim. And you can say things like that to a 6-year-old when they have their lid back on. And I know she already has like remorse and regret often after she blows up. So this is like delicate. You have to be delicate with this. But even maybe next time she sees her aunt, she can say, remember what happened last time when your aunt was being so nice and taking all this time to play with you at the pool? And then when you wanted to stay, you ended up yelling at her, like, how do we want to treat, or how do we want to treat Auntie today? Like what kind of a visit do we want to have? So everybody listen, like 6 is at the edge of a developmental stage. And see, this is what we're going to be working with for the rest of the year, right? Like she's heading into 6 to 9. The expectations are shifting at school, 6 to 9-year-old age band, and that transition, you can start to level up your parenting around like choosing, not just retrospect, like, choosing between a consequence and the right choice. Like we might say, do you need to, can you stop yelling and you can stay at the pool, or do we need to leave? It still is on, that's like the 3 to 6. So that's the bridge, right? We're kind of like we're in the lower stage. The upper stage is, 6 to 9 would be something like, what kind of a visit do you want to have with Auntie today? What are some things we could do and not do to make sure we have that kind of visit? And a 6-year-old can start to think that through proactively. So it's going to be really interesting to see how you play with that tool going forward, particularly around her times when she might be in a situation where she doesn't have full control. She doesn't get to have what she wants. The other thing you can continue bringing in, and I know you already have awareness of this, T, but this is kind of for everybody else's benefit, is really lean on the previewing tool whenever you can, particularly as she's transitioning and into a new school year. So like when you do have information like, oh, I heard that PE is on Wednesdays. What might we expect when we're outside and hot and you've burned all your energy? How might that feel? What might you need? Oh, I need to like get some water and, like kind of have some downtime when I get home that day. Okay, so maybe when you get picked up by grandma today, you can build in some time where you just get to chill, right? Those kinds of things you can start to do with her because of her age and stage. She can like think that far forward, like across the whole day. So previewing gets to kind of elevate to this older stage as well. You're transitioning her to that. How do those things sound to you?
Yeah, that sounds right. I like the open-endedness of the questions.
Yeah.
Like, what would you like to do with your auntie, or, like what kinds of activities would you like to see? Because I do think that she really makes a lot of things like many kids do, like a power struggle. And so they want to have this sense of autonomy of like, what can I do to like have control over things, or like direct how I want to see things go down. And it's tricky sometimes. I'll be real. Like some kids will answer questions, and some kids, like any other person of any other age, will stonewall a bit,
Yeah.
Sometimes she'll just say gibberish, and I'm just like, okay, well, maybe we'll talk about this later, or maybe we'll make this into a game, or maybe there's I think that I just want to be mindful of like where her mind is at, and then when there's like opportunities to have conversation.
Yeah, that's a really good way of thinking of it. It's like, okay, maybe not now. And that we have to kind of have this practice of putting a pin in it and remembering to bring it up later, which I like, especially across like 24, 36, 48 students. I even have like a notepad in my pocket because my memory's not the best. So I'd be like, this child, this topic, and then try to find a time. But when you have the one child, like you can sort of build up this bank of topics. And then when you see the opportunity, you're like, oh, this is the time. Let's bring it up now. So I love that. Yeah, good. Nice tea. The other thing you can do around control and autonomy is you can preview for them what level of influence they're going to have and what is not negotiable or not within their control. So oftentimes previewing is actually just to help them set up their expectations of how much influence they're going to have. So you can say, when we go to grandma's house, I know that they want to stay indoors today because it's hot. So we're going to need to choose indoor activities. I wonder what you're going to end up doing at grandma's inside, so that like maybe she's been really on a tear about like her scooter or something. You can like head that off a little bit so that you don't get the meltdown of, but I want to go scooting, So if you start to see themes, you can give her heads up about how much influence she has on those particular topics. And that can be wildly helpful as she's heading into this new stage. She wants to have influence. I mean, she's always wanted influence, but now she's like she's going to start bringing up fairness, what her friends can and can't do. Like this is the new stage, 6 to 9. And so we're getting ready for it, and we're here for it, and we're here for you. We're good. We got
Yeah,
you back.
thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Anything about what I just shared that you wanted to, how's that landing with you? Anything that stood out there going forward?
Yeah, one thing I also like about our conversations is just like the developmental phases that people go through at different ages, and how it changes over time. I sometimes feel like we expect adult behavior from younger people, um, and it's just not realistic at all. Their brains are still developing. And so it's great to be like, this is actually very normal. This is normal developmental behavior. And as things change, as they get older, these are things to be more aware of their capabilities and their ability to like problem solve and stuff. So I really like that.
Yeah. I think what you said about meeting her where she is to like really, like when she starts with gibberish or she stonewalls or she doesn't answer the question. I really think of a 6 is my favorite ages because I've taught 3 to 6, I've taught 6 to 9. And so I've always had 6-year-olds, and I've always feel like I've really seen that transition. That's literally her going, I feel more like a 3 to 6-year-old right now.
Yeah.
And then when she's like getting all up in arms around, like, that's not fair. How come she got to, like, that's her sliding up to 6 to 9. Like, I want to be a part of creating the norms of our little culture here. Like, I want to weigh in, I want to vote. And that's when you can go, we can start to do things like launch family meetings and have an agenda and those kinds of things when she starts showing up like that. But then she might come to the meeting and go, blah, 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 blah. She's like, oh, we're in a 3 to 6 mood.
Yeah.
So it's a really fun age, and you'll start to really see a difference about halfway through the school year. Particularly if she's like really, she's in a culture where there's a lot of like kind of meta discussion about how the day goes and the kids get to have some weighing in on things. She'll start to have a lot more practice in that, and we have that to look forward to. So I'm excited that we get to have this year together, the school year together. It's a great one. It's a really developmentally transitional one. So much more ahead. And thanks for letting us do this live so other folks could hear and kind of peek in on a little mini coaching session here, this last part. I appreciate that so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me and giving more chances for coaching.
Of course. So let's close with and wrap up with, do you have a message for any of the parents out there who maybe like coming up against some of the same struggles you have now, or like maybe some of the things that you've worked through these last 3 years? Like, what would you say to them?
Yeah, I think that the best part about being on this parenting journey is it's such a good investment. Like I think about my kid, and this is the time of our lives where we spend the most time together. The older she gets, the less and less time we have together to spend together, to grow together, to learn together. And doing the work up front pays off. And knowing that, I think sometimes I look back, I'm like, oh, I wish I did this better. I wish I did that better. But knowing that I really invested time in my kid and my family to be healthier and happier and set the foundation for a future, I think makes me feel good. And you can always do more, quote unquote, but at least you're doing the work. And I think the only thing we can really, expect of each other is to just make sure we find ways to do the work when we can.
Powerful. Can you see why I brought Tiffany on for an interview and insights? So good to have you here again. And if you have any questions for Tiffany and you're in the Facebook group, she's tagged in the post and she'll get notifications, or for me, let us know. And again, in case this is your time, this is your time to invest in your parenting and wanting to get support, be a part of a community with like Tiffany and others like her. Parents are in it and doing the work and doing it together. It's hard to do it on your own. I mean, I find, especially with things that are really emotional and really important and high stakes, I can get, I don't know about you, I can kind of shrink away from it. But then when I see, oh, it's safe because someone's like, the ocean waves look really big, but you see 20 people swimming and you're like, okay, maybe it is okay to swim today. You can kind of get into the water with everybody, and you don't have to swim alone, right? You've got like other people for guidance and support and examples, and If this is your year to do that, reach out soon. Let me know. You can email me at raisingourresilience@gmail.com or DM me on Facebook. Let me know. It's raisingourresilience@gmail.com. And we'll just get together, do a quick consult and see if it's a fit for you to hop in. One way or the other, we'll have some time with me, some one-on-one attention, which I'd love to give you if you feel like the work is what is appealing to you right now. All right, T, thanks again. Lots of love to you and your little one. And I don't know, somehow bringing up your grandparents the grandparents really made me smile because I had such a great conversation with them after the last workshop. And so glad you're all teams up, getting behind your daughter. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Vanessa. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, everybody. So we'll close out with that. May you continue to find your way to being a calm and empowered parent, raising happy, confident, resilient kids. And best of luck and lots of love to you until next time. Bye for now.